item number 1 is attendance. The book's being handed round, so please sign at your leisure. Apologies for absence. Have we received any apologies for absence? From Councillor Veronica Quick. Everyone else, I believe, is here. So moving straight on to declarations of interest, and hand over to Dennis first.
Thank you, Leader. I'm only aware of one interest, and I understand that you as Leader wish to declare a prejudicial interest in relation to item number 6, which is the disposal of the rugby pitch at Pontypool Park. You are a season ticket holder with Pontypool RFC, and therefore I understand you will be leaving the room when this item is being discussed. I'm not aware of any other interests.
Do I need to declare an interest as part of my portfolio? No.
No.
Fine, thank you.
Yeah, confirm that, and therefore hand over to Councillor Clark. Sorry, item 5 then is updates on actions. There's no actions to update, hence my glossing over of it. Any objection to that one? Okay, right, move on to agenda item 6 then, which is the disposal. So I'll leave at this point. Apologies. The minutes of the previous Cabinet meeting on the 9th of the 4th, if I can just run through those. They're from page 3 onwards, so page 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, page 14, page 15, page 16 and page 17. Very fulsome minutes there. And then the Welsh language version on page 18, page 19, 20, page 21, page 22, page 23, page 24, page 25, 26, 27, page 28, page 29, page 30, page 31 and page 32. So everyone agreed that they're a true and accurate record? Okay, we've done item 5 then, to moving on to item 6, and at this point I can leave.
Thanks. Thank you, Leader. While you're leaving, I'll just say a few remarks by way of introduction. The reports are, as one would expect, a very comprehensive report, setting everything out in detail, and I know Rachel will add to that. It was a commitment we as a council made in July to look at this in a positive and constructive manner. I think Rachel and her team and Alan as the executive member have honoured that commitment, and I think today's report is the fruit of that, where we have recognised the historic ties of this rugby club, its past fortunes and future fortunes, I hope, the way they've been playing recently, and how they are so entwined with the town of Pontypool, and even more entwined with the park itself. But in recognising that, we also recognise the other users of the park, whether it's the general public or the other clubs and societies that use the park, and we as a council are honour bound to do the best for all. There is a third element that could benefit from this and should benefit from that, and it's the historic town of Pontypool itself. With the way the club are playing, and onwards and upwards, naturally, if the club is doing well, people who come to support will be using the facilities of the town, and it can boost the local economy during match days and bring much needed revenue into the town centre. And I think this report balances all those needs. I think there's been a very constructive public consultation, and the report clearly indicates how we've listened to that, and by and large the vast majority, I think it was 6 from memory, who totally opposed it, but the vast majority support the move, and as I say, I think it benefits both the club, the users of the park and the town of Pontypool itself. So, without further ado, I think Rachel can take us through the rest of the report.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I haven't got much more to add to that. It's okay. I think this report is the culmination and hopefully the beginning of a renewed and strengthened partnership with the rugby club. As Councillor Clark has alluded to, we made the wrong headlines last summer when there was a real threat that the club would leave the park, and there was public and member concern, and so we have worked very hard with the club, partners and stakeholders in the park to arrive at a solution. Councillor Clark has alluded to it. The park is not without its own complexity and complications, and as you'll be aware, the park was gifted to the council, and our management of the park is overseen by a covenant which states that the park must be held for the use of the public, and this includes the rugby pitch, the surrounds and also the grandstand. However, to secure the club's aspirations for promotion, meet WRU guidelines where they do require security of tenure, allow for investment in the pitch and the grandstand, which I think there's been overwhelming support for, that the club needed to have security of tenure, and this can only be achieved through the granting of a lease. But the current covenant would not allow for that. So we had to go through a two-stage process. Firstly, we had to engage with the covenant holders, and they agreed for a partial lease of the covenant, and this is outlined in Appendix 2 of the report in terms of the red line area. Secondly, we needed to undertake a consultation in line with the playing field regulations, as the granting of a lease in legal terms is classed as disposal of a sports pitch. I think that's an important distinction that we're making. This required an impact assessment to be done, which is at Appendix 3 of the report. The impact assessment, given the pitch was to remain, identified that the loss of a sports pitch was negligible. It's just we're losing it for the continued use of the public. However, given the club's assurances that they will still allow for third-party use, it was deemed to be a minimal impact. This was open for consultation for a total period of 8 weeks. And was well advertised around the park, in the libraries, in the leisure centre, in civic centre and online as well through our consultation forum. And it is the report of this consultation process that's brought to you today to determine whether under the playing field regulations a lease can be granted. It is officer recommendation that a lease is granted to the club and that final negotiations and finalisation of the lease are delegated to myself as Chief Officer and the Deputy Chief Executive Resources in consultation with the Deputy Leader. So this is not the actual lease to be signed today, it's the principles of granting a lease with the appropriate delegations. However, I think it's important the core principles of the lease be outlined as part of a transparent and open consultation process. I think, first of all, we have to thank, we had 124 responses from members of the public, which is a really good engagement, of which 106 were completely in favour. I also have to inform Cabinet that no responses were received after the consultation period or between the period when this report was published and today. So what you have in the report is the total picture. The reasons for support was about the investment, the reasons Councillor Clark outlined about the support for Pontypool, its historic place within the park, but also allow them to build the fence, which has secured planning permission to tackle issues of vandalism. Everyone's heard the stories about razor blades in the pitch, etc. And they also intend to invest in the grandstand and to make that a more amenable visual attraction. There were concerns about impacts on the users of the pitch, and I think this is sort of like where the negotiations are going to be critical. The club has publicly assured the council and the other clubs that they want to be a community resource and work with all local users to facilitate an agreement. We are exploring how this can be contained in the lease without undermining the club's right of exclusive possession through the granting of the lease. So there is a fine balance to be done, but we do believe it to be achieved. And you'll see in the documentation that the club have actually responded, and it's part of the report that they will continue to honour third-party use. There were concerns about the length of the lease and also how much the council would be involved in the future. I think it's important that with a lease that the pitch and the grandstand will always remain a Torvine asset, and therefore we will always have a vested interest in its future. The club want to work in partnership with the council and vice versa. The current proposal, therefore, is for a 25 plus 25 term lease, so those are 50 years in total, obviously subject to negotiation. This term is considered appropriate given the level of investment the club have indicated they are looking to put into the facility. The detail of this is still being discussed and, as I said, will be confirmed through the lease finalisation process. I think it's also important to note that the granting of a lease, there will be a small revenue saving for maintenance. It wasn't the main driver for this, but these financial times, it's always welcomed. In terms of next steps, if Cabinet approve the recommendation, then the decision will be published in the local media for 2 weeks, and then a further 6 weeks period decision under the Playing Fields regulation process. During this time, the lease will be negotiated, and when appropriate, other timescales have passed in terms of a 3-month window in terms of any review process, then we will be able to sign the lease, and the pitch surrounding area will be disposed of to the club. I think it's fair to say I have to give a special thanks to Andrew Neville, who has now left the authority, but he did all the work on the impact assessment and did the engagement with the club and helped them with the design features, which helped them with planning, but also Andrew Osborne and Joe Giatra, who really well led the consultation process. Every single person who engaged with the consultation has received a response and been engaged with and has kept in contact. So I think they've done a really excellent job. We've never done this process before. It's not an easy legal one, but they've done a really, really good job. So I therefore commend the report to Cabinet, and that Cabinet approve the recommendations as outlined in section 14. Thank you.
Members, any comments or observations? If I take you then to the recommendations on page 10 electronically, item 14, that the Cabinet approves the disposal of the area set out in Appendix 2 by way of a lease to Pontypool Rugby Limited, notes the comments and welcomes the contribution from the public and stakeholders through the consultation and commits to securing both club and community interests through the lease, notes the position of the covenant holder regards the partial release of the covenant insofar as it applies to the area set out at Appendix 2, notes the view of the Charity Commission and that Cabinet approves that the negotiating and completion of the lease be delegated to the existing Chief Executive Resources and the Chief Officer Neighbourhoods Plan and Public Protection in consultation with the Deputy Leader. Are you so happy, members? Yep. Thank you. I declare this meeting closed.